Welcome back to another story that will pull at your heart and challenge your mind. Here, we dive deep into real emotions, raw confessions, and moments that change lives forever. So sit back, take a breath, and let's begin. I never thought I'd be the kind of man writing something like this, let alone admitting it to myself. For the better part of 15 years, I considered my marriage solid. Not perfect. God knows we had our rough patches, but stable, functional, and built on mutual respect. We married in our late 20s, both with some baggage from past relationships, both a little cautious but optimistic. We made a home together in a modest 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. We didn't have kids, partly by choice, partly by a few failed attempts. And that fact shaped our marriage in ways I didn't fully realize until recently. I'm not an overly emotional guy. I've never been the type to gush about feelings or linger in long conversations about where we stand. But I always showed up. I worked hard, paid the bills on time, did my share of the housework, remembered her birthday every year without fail. She was the one who brought warmth into the house, organizing little dinner gatherings, decorating for holidays, leaving sticky notes in my lunch bag with jokes or reminders to eat something healthy. About 2 years ago, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, at least not at first. Just little things. She started staying late at work more often. She became glued to her phone, smiling at texts she didn't share. She said she was just tired when I suggested going out on the weekends. Our intimacy, which had never been fiery but had always been steady, started fading into once-a-month encounters that felt rushed, almost mechanical. I told myself it was stress. Her job had been demanding lately, and maybe I believed that. Maybe I wanted to. One Friday evening, I came home early. I had planned to surprise her, cook her favorite pasta dish, open a bottle of wine, try to bring some spark back. Her car wasn't in the driveway, but that wasn't unusual. She often went for a late workout before heading home. I started chopping vegetables when my phone buzzed. It was a text from her, working late. Don't wait up. Except, her work phone number had a different tone when she texted from it. This was from her personal phone, and she'd made that same excuse 3 times that month. I didn't do anything right away. I wish I could say I confronted her then and there, but part of me didn't want to believe where my thoughts were going. Instead, I poured myself a drink and sat in the quiet kitchen for hours, waiting. When she finally came in after 10 p.m., she smelled faintly of perfume. Not the brand she usually wore, but something lighter, floral. Her hair was a little tousled, and she avoided eye contact when she kissed me on the cheek. That night, lying awake next to her, I felt a coldness creeping into my chest. It wasn't just suspicion, it was the sense that I was losing her, and maybe had been for a long time without realizing it. The turning point came a few weeks later. We were sitting at breakfast on a Saturday, me reading the paper, her scrolling on her phone. I casually asked if she'd want to take a weekend trip somewhere, just the two of us. She didn't look up when she said, "I don't think now's a good time." Her voice was flat. Something in me snapped quietly, like a thread breaking. I realized she wasn't just pulling away, she was already gone in some way. I started watching more closely. Not in a jealous, frantic way, just paying attention. I noticed her sudden interest in new clothes, the extra care with her makeup, the way she'd tilt her phone away from me when reading a message. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A man's name flashed on the screen, one I didn't recognize. The message preview read, "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." I didn't open it. I didn't need to. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't come with a neat confession or an undeniable scene you can point to. It seeps in through little cracks, until one day, you're standing in the rubble of what you thought was solid ground. I didn't confront her right away. Some people would have, but I couldn't. Not yet. The moment I saw that message, my mind split into two tracks. On one track, I was the man who had just been cheated on, who had every right to slam the phone down in front of her and demand an explanation. On the other, I was a man terrified of confirming the truth, because once you do, there's no undoing it. Denial has a strange comfort. It lets you pretend you still have something to salvage. The days after that felt like living in a parallel universe. Outwardly, we went through the same motions: coffee in the morning, short conversations about errands, the occasional dinner together. But underneath, I was watching her every move. I started noticing how often she smiled at her phone when she thought I wasn't looking, how she guarded it like it was an extension of her body. She'd step out onto the porch to take certain calls, her voice low and hushed. I found myself timing her, late nights at work, and realizing they followed a predictable pattern. 2 to 3 times a week, always on certain days. I started keeping my own secrets. I installed a simple location tracker on her car. Nothing fancy, just something I could check from my phone. The first night I used it, I told her I was staying late at my own job to finish a project. She believed me easily, barely glancing up from whatever she was reading on her laptop. Around 8 p.m., I opened the app. Her car wasn't at her office. It was parked on the other side of town, in a residential area I didn't recognize. I didn't drive over. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a convenience store and stared at the little blinking dot on my phone screen. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from something heavier, like grief mixed with nausea. I could picture her inside some stranger's apartment, laughing, touching, looking alive in a way she hadn't with me in months. That night, when she came home just after 11, she acted normal, asked me if I'd eaten, told me her meeting had run late. I nodded and said nothing. I went upstairs, sat in the dark, and listened to her move around the kitchen. Every sound felt wrong, like it belonged to a stranger in my house. A few days later, I decided I needed to see it with my own eyes. The waiting was eating me alive. On a Tuesday evening, I left work early, parked 2 blocks from where her car was showing on my tracker, and walked the rest of the way. It was a quiet street, lined with small older houses. Her car was in the driveway of one painted pale blue, the porch light glowing in the early dusk. I didn't go up to the door. Instead, I stood on the sidewalk, feeling the weight of the air around me. Through the partially drawn curtains, I saw movement, her silhouette, and then another figure, taller, broader. They were close, talking. Then they disappeared from view. I stayed there for maybe 10 minutes, my chest tight, my jaw clenched, before walking back to my car. That was the moment the denial died. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the insides of my life and left me with the shell. For the rest of the week, I went through the motions. I didn't ask her questions, and she didn't offer explanations. But the silence between us grew heavier. She started avoiding even small touches. No hand on my arm when she walked past. No absent-minded kiss before bed. It was as if she knew I knew. But neither of us had the courage, or cruelty, to put it into words yet. One night, I sat in my car outside our house, engine running, for almost half an hour before going inside. I thought about just driving away. Not forever, just somewhere far enough that I couldn't hear her voice, far enough to breathe without feeling like I was choking on her lies. But I didn't. I turned off the ignition, went inside, and found her on the couch, reading. She looked up, smiled faintly, and asked how my day was. I told her it was fine. The thing about betrayal is that the moment you know, the clock starts ticking. It's not just the relationship that's on borrowed time. It's you. Your patience, your dignity, your ability to look that person in the eyes without seeing every unspoken truth hanging between you. I didn't know when it would end, but I knew it was coming. And once it did, nothing would ever be the same. The breaking point didn't happen in some explosive movie-style showdown. It was quieter than that, and somehow that made it worse. It was a Sunday morning, gray and rainy. We'd both been home all weekend, which was unusual lately. She'd been acting softer, almost, making coffee for both of us, asking if I wanted to watch a movie, brushing against me in the kitchen. I kept wondering if it was guilt, or if she was trying to smooth over something she sensed was cracking. We were in the living room, Mum flipping through a book, her curled up on the couch with her laptop. She got a phone call and, without thinking, answered it right there. I couldn't hear the other voice, but I could hear hers. Low, almost too low to catch, but not low enough to hide the tone. It wasn't the voice she used with friends or coworkers. It was warmer, private. She got up, walked toward the hallway, and I followed, slowly, without meaning to. She didn't notice I was behind her until she reached the bedroom and shut the door. I stood outside, not close enough to hear words, but enough to hear her laugh softly. That laugh hit me harder than any physical blow could have. It was the same laugh she used to give me when we were newly married, before the weight of routine and distance settled in. When she came out, she froze for half a second seeing me there. Not guilty, just startled. "That was work," she said too quickly. I didn't call her on it. Instead, I asked, "Are you happy?" Her expression shifted, like she didn't know whether to be offended or confused. "What kind of question is that?" "The kind where I'm asking if you're happy with this, with us." She didn't answer right away. She looked down, fiddling with her sleeve. "Things have been different lately," she said finally. "Different," I repeated. "You mean you've been sleeping with someone else?" Her head snapped up. "What? No." She stopped herself. The denial didn't even finish forming in her mouth before it died there. She looked at me, and in that silence, the truth was louder than any words could be. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was in the chair, my hands gripping the armrests. "How long?" She bit her lip. "A few months. It's strange, the details your brain grabs in moments like this." I remember noticing the faint red mark on her wrist from her watch. I remember the sound of rain on the window. I remember the way my own breathing seemed too loud in my ears. "Who is he?" I asked. She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." She didn't answer. That silence told me two things. One, it was someone she saw regularly enough that naming him would change things in a way she didn't want to face. Two, she had no intention of stopping. I stood up and walked to the kitchen because I couldn't stand still anymore. She followed, keeping a few feet of distance like she was afraid to get too close. "I didn't plan for this to happen," she said. "I was lonely. We've been apart for a long time, even when we're in the same room. And he noticed me." That last part stuck like a thorn. He noticed me. I wanted to scream that I had noticed her too, that every small shift in her mood, every time she stayed late at work, every guarded text, I'd noticed. But I didn't say it. Instead, I asked, "Do you want to stay married to me?" She hesitated just a fraction too long. "I don't know." That's the thing about "I don't know." It's almost always no, but softer, easier to digest. I told her I needed space. Packed a bag, grabbed my jacket, and left without a plan. I drove aimlessly for hours, the wipers dragging across the windshield as the rain blurred the road. Eventually, I ended up at a cheap roadside motel, the kind with buzzing neon signs and thin curtains. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall, feeling like my whole life had been rewritten in the span of an hour. In that room, I realized something important. I wasn't just angry at her. I was angry at myself for missing the signs earlier, for pretending not to see them when they became obvious, for letting the fear of change keep me from asking the hard questions until it was too late. The betrayal wasn't just hers. It was mine too, in a way. I'd betrayed myself by staying silent for so long. I stayed at the motel for 3 nights. I didn't tell anyone where I was, didn't answer most texts, and only responded to work emails in the shortest possible way. I needed that isolation, even if it was just to hear my own thoughts without her presence pressing against them. She texted me twice the first night, "Please come home so we can talk." And later, "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. On the second day, she called. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice sounded calm, almost too calm, like she was trying not to push. "I understand you need space," she said. "But we can't figure this out if you disappear." That word hit me. I wasn't sure there was a we anymore. By the third day, I had to make a choice. I couldn't just live in limbo forever. So I drove back, not because I had decided to forgive her, but because I needed to know exactly where things stood. I didn't want to piece it together from half-truths and silences. When I walked into the house, she was sitting at the dining table, a mug in her hands. She looked tired, the kind of tired that lives behind the eyes. I put my bag down and sat across from her. Neither of us spoke for a minute. The refrigerator hummed in the background. "I ended it," she said finally. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt so predictable. "You ended it," I repeated. "Yes." She looked at me like she wanted that to mean something huge. "With who?" I asked. She stared into her mug. "It doesn't matter. It's over." But it did matter. It mattered because knowing would either confirm my suspicions or give me something entirely new to reckon with. Still, I didn't push. Part of me already knew the name, even if I couldn't prove it. "Why now?" I asked. She hesitated. "Because I realized I want to try to fix this. Us. Ah. That should have been the moment I felt relief, but instead it felt like she was offering me a patched-up umbrella after I'd already been standing in the rain for hours. My mind kept circling the same thought. She didn't stop because she loved me. She stopped because she was caught, because the affair had shifted from exhilarating to risky. "I can't just go back to normal," I said. "I know," she replied quickly. "I'm not asking for that. I don't want to throw everything away without trying." Trying. The word sounded thin compared to the weight of what had happened. Over the next week, we moved like two people living parallel lives in the same house. We ate dinner together but didn't linger at the table. We talked about groceries and bills but not about feelings. Every time she looked at me too long, I could see something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear of what I might say next. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs, made tea, and sat in the dark. She came down a few minutes later, wearing one of my old sweatshirts, and sat across from me. "Do you hate me?" she asked. I thought about it for a long moment. "No," I said honestly. "But I don't trust you." She nodded like she'd expected that. "I'll earn it back. The thing is, trust isn't a ladder you can just climb again once you've fallen. It's more like glass, you can glue it together, but you'll always see the cracks." 2 weeks after my return, I got an anonymous message on social media. No name, no profile picture, just text. "You should know she's still seeing him. They meet during lunch breaks now." My first reaction was to dismiss it as someone stirring trouble. But the seed was planted, and once it was there, it grew fast. The next day, I left work at noon and drove to a small cafe near her office. I parked across the street. At 12:17, she walked out, laughing. Not alone. With him. The same man from that house. I recognized the way she tilted her head toward him. The same way she used to tilt it toward me when we were deep in conversation. They didn't see me. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. The truth was right there, in broad daylight, without the shadows or the secrecy. That evening I came home and started packing my things. Not just a bag this time. She came into the bedroom, panic flashing across her face. "What are you doing?" "I'm leaving," I said. "I told you it was over." I saw you today. I cut in. I saw you with him. You didn't end anything. You just made it harder for me to catch you. Her mouth opened, closed. She didn't deny it. That was the final nail. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked out, my suitcase in hand, into the cool night air. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to clarity. 2 years passed before I saw her again. In that time, my life had shifted in ways I couldn't have predicted. I'd moved into a bigger apartment, changed jobs, and built a routine that no longer revolved around her absence. I wasn't dating seriously. Occasional dinners, a few short-lived flings, but I wasn't looking for permanence. I'd gotten used to my own company. Comfortable, even. It happened on a Tuesday evening in early autumn. I was at a mid-scale restaurant, meeting an old colleague for dinner. The place was busy but not crowded, the kind of hum that made conversations feel private. Halfway through my meal, I glanced toward the bar, and there she was. She hadn't seen me yet. She was sitting with a man I didn't recognize, older than me by a decade, well-dressed, the type who seemed polished down to the cufflinks. She was laughing, leaning in close, her hand resting lightly on his arm. For a moment, the sight hit me like a sucker punch. Not because I still wanted her, but because seeing her alive in that same body language brought back flashes of all the years I'd spent on the other side of it. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, streaked with more gray than I remembered. There were faint lines around her eyes, but her smile was still sharp. I watched her for a few seconds longer, then turned back to my conversation, pretending I hadn't noticed. It should have ended there. But when my colleague left early, I stayed for another drink, half out of curiosity, half out of something I didn't want to name. As I was paying my tab, she walked past my table. Our eyes met. For a moment, it was like neither of us knew whether to acknowledge the other. Then she stopped. "Hey," she said softly. I nodded. "Hey." She glanced back at the man at the bar, then at me. "You look good." "So do you," I lied. Not because she didn't look good, but because the compliment felt mechanical, like reciting an old line from a play we'd both long since quit performing. There was a pause. Then she said, "I heard you moved. Doing well?" "I am," I said simply. I didn't ask about her. I didn't want to. She hesitated, like there was something she wanted to say, but wasn't sure she should. "I'm sorry," she finally said. I studied her face. There was no defensiveness this time, no half-excuse. Just the flat truth. Maybe too late to matter. "I know," I said. She gave a faint smile, the kind you give a stranger you'll never see again. "Take care of yourself. You too." She walked back to the bar, to the man waiting for her. I left the restaurant without looking back. On the drive home, I realized something. I didn't feel anger or longing or even satisfaction. What I felt was distance. Not just from her, but from the person I'd been when I loved her. That man had been raw, trusting, and a little naive. He was gone, replaced by someone who understood that some closures don't come from conversations. They come from time, from living long enough that the wound becomes part of the map, but no longer hurts when you touch it. When I got home, I poured a drink, sat by the window, and let the city lights wash over me. Somewhere out there, she was continuing her story, and I was continuing mine. Separate now for good. And for the first time, that felt exactly right. Every story leaves its mark, and this one is no different. If it touched you, made you think, or stirred something inside, don't forget to subscribe and join us for more. Until next time, take care of your heart.